So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. No, so we'll discuss today about activity-based costing or activity-based accounting or activity-based management. So yun yung ating discussion for today. Alright. So it is more on uh, estimating your manufacturing overhead. Alright. Chapter 4, no, in terms of the activity-based costing, number one is that you will recognize the difference between traditional costing and activity-based costing. And number two, very important here is about identify the steps in the development of the activity-based costing. And number two, uh, identify the steps in the development of activity-based costing. And number three is all about identifying the activity cost pool used in the activity-based costing. And number four, identify and use in the activity cost drivers in the activity-based costing. Alright. And number five, I will discuss also about understand the benefits and limitations of activity-based costing. And number six is differentiate between the value added or the non-value added. So we will end with the discussion about the meaning of value added and the non-value added. Okay. So, what do you mean of activity-based costing? No? So, ito yung ating discussion for today. No? Activity-based costing versus your traditional costing. Alright. So, traditional costing systems also need also for the new accounting system. And number three is activity-based costing. Okay? Uh, and also, illustration also of traditional costing versus activity-based costing. So, yun yung ating mga discussions later. Alright. Sige. And also, some of this also, but I will not discuss the just-in-time. Hindi kasama ang just-in-time, no? Activity-based costing ng look, a closer look, no? Between the benefits of it, the limitations also, when to switch to the activity-based costing. You have also your activity-based costing, hierarchy of it, no? Value added and the non-value added. Okay. We go first with this, no? So, what do you mean here of activity-based costing? So, ano ba class ang ibig sabihin, no? Recognize muna between traditional costing and activity-based costing class. When when I discussed about traditional costing, no, particularly in the job order costing, if you notice, alright, very important here is that we compute for our predetermined overhead rate, diba? If you notice last, very important here is the computations of our manufacturing overhead. Okay? If you notice, no, in terms of the manufacturing overhead, if you notice, is that it is based on the estimated amount. Yes, it is based on the estimated amount. Kaya nga class, no, in terms of this estimated amount, no, if you notice here, alright, so very important here is that it is to be assigned. That's why it is what you call your overhead or indirect cost. Okay? That's why very important here is to compute for the estimated overhead. Okay, unlike direct materials and direct labor costs, which can usually be easily traced with a specific product. Ano nga yung class reason, no? What is the reason why the overhead is based on the estimated? Because yung ating SOA ay marireceive lang natin usually at the end of the month or usually at the 2 months pa or 1 or 3 months after pa nga no? Meaning to say, we need to estimate the factory overhead. Sabi nga sa kasabihan, anin pa ang bato, ay ang kabayo kung patay na, ay anin pa ang damo kung patay na yung kabayo. Okay? So that's the reason why, no, in the activity-based costing is to compute estimated amount, no? So and our basically class our activity cost driver is what you call your direct labor cost. Okay, next one. Next one also, no, very important here as part of your manufacturing overhead. It is again, as sinabi ko kanina, yan ay based on your predetermined overhead rate. How do we compute for our predetermined overhead rate? If you notice, go back to the formula. The formula here is that the estimated annual overhead cost divided by annual cost driver, di ba? Yan yung ating formula in computing for our activity for our predetermined overhead rate. If we will use the cost driver as direct labor hours, we will compute that to be multiplied by the actual direct labor hours para makuha natin yung applied manufacturing overhead. Okay? So we assume that your direct labor costs and machine hours were the relevant activity basis for the assignments of all your overhead and the process costing respectively. Alright, so that's our basis class. Okay, so when the overhead cost allocations systems were first developed, yes, you have your what you call direct labor. It is made up a large part of your total manufacturing cost. No? It was widely used, accepted when there are high correlations so between direct labor and incurrence of your manufacturing overhead. So meaning class, we have our direct labor cost. So we have our overhead cost and we have our product cost. Okay. Again, in today's environment, yes, direct labor is often the appropriate basis for assigning overhead cost to the product. Okay? It is appropriate when, again, we will use direct labor to constitutes a significant part of total product cost, and also we have high correlation between your direct labor and the changes in the amount of what you call overhead cost. Okay. Pero class, hindi naman habang buhay that we are in or we are using direct labor hours, no? If you are doing manual, yes, you are doing it. Your cost driver is a direct labor. Pero now, since of course as time goes by, nag-i-improve naman yung ating ang ating company. Okay? Because of the advancement in technology, all right? Because of technological innovation, 'di ba? What else? Because of our automation, no? It has changed the manufacturing environment drastically, no? The amount of direct labor used in many industries is now greatly reduced, all right? And total overhead costs have significantly increased. Kaya nga class, you have here what you call, no? They will now use our plant-wide predetermined overhead, no? So we will use our predetermined overhead already. Okay, so meaning to say, yes, we still use direct labor, direct materials, direct labor, no? Pero class, mas maganda na that we will now use your activity-based costing. Okay, so that's why we recognizing these distortions. All right, many companies now will use your machine hours. Okay, machine hours, yes, you will use the machine hours as the sole plant weight basis. All right, so particularly in allocating our overhead costs. All right, and also, but even the machine hours may not suffice as the sole plant wide basis for allocating all overhead. That's why here class, if you notice, may tinatawag na tayong multiple activity or multiple allocation basis. So mamaya, no, I will discuss to you about how do we compute for our activity cost pool. So very important here is what you call activity cost pool, no? Class, situations here very important here is that managers need now or need a new overhead cost allocations. Ano tawag doon? Activity-based costing. Again, it is also known as activity-based costing. Alright. But in the first place, ano ba ang tinatawag nating activity-based costing? What do you mean of activity-based costing? So, ABC, by the way class don't mention it as ABC costing because activity-based costing yan. Or it should be ABC na lang, okay? So, activity-based costing or ABC, it allocates overhead to the multiple activity cost pool and assign them to the activity driver, no? Again, allocates overhead to multiple activity cost pools and assign the activity cost pools to produce or to the production by the means of your cost driver. Class, if you notice, you have the same formula. Okay? Diba? Ano yung formula natin, class, sa predetermined overhead rate? Estimated annual overhead cost divided by your estimated cost driver. Okay? Then, to be multiplied by the actual cost driver, and that's your applied manufacturing overhead. In class, in the activity-based costing, same din naman yung formula. Estimated overhead cost, pero it is based on per activity. Divided by estimated cost driver per activity. So, that's your formula in computing for our activity-based rate. Alright, in the ABC costing, an activity or any event, actions, and transactions or work sequence that causes the incurrence of your cost in the production of your product or rendering of a service. Kaya class, may tinatawag tayong cost driver also. No? Same also in terms of your cost driver. No? So, same yan. No? If you notice, same lang siya sa ating predetermined overhead rate. So, in the cost driver is any factor or any activity that has direct or cost relationship with the resources consumed. And that's what you call activity-based costing. Alright. So, class, no? When you say about activity-based costing, it first allocates cost to the activities and then to produce and then to the products based on each product of those activities. So, yan class, ha? Yan yung ating mga kasama, no? So, particularly in computing for activity-based costing. Ano pa? The reasoning behind activity-based costing is that it is simple as that product consume activities and activities consume our resources. So, that's one, ha? Yan yung the reason behind about activity-based costing. Okay? So, products consume activities while activities consume your resources. Okay? So, that's the thing that we need to consider. Alright. Next one. So, how do we account for this activity-based costing? Okay? So, very important here is that overhead is first to be allocated to activity cost pool. Alright? Of which is a distinct type of activity. So, overhead in the cost pool is assigned to the product using cost driver, which represents the measure of a number of individual activities undertaken or produce products to rendering of your services. So, that's the thing, no? That we need to consider, no? Especially in terms of your activity-based costing. Okay? So, in terms of the activity-based costing. Okay. Next one. So, activity-based costing. Please take note of it, ha? Not all products or service share equally in the activity. So, you need to consider that one, no? Not all the products and services share equally in the activities. Please take note. The more complex the product is in terms of the manufacturing, alright, the more activities and the cost driver it is likely to have. Alright? And there would be there would be a little or no correlation between the changes in the cost driver and consumption of it in terms of the overhead. Class, next slide, no? Will show you ano ba ang ibig sabihin ng activity-based costing. Class, please take note of this. Please take note, no? Ano yung formula, class, ng ating predetermined overhead rate? Again, total overhead cost divided by our estimated cost driver. Parehas na parehas lang yan dito, class. Kaya lang, ang pagkakaiba dito is you have different activity cost pool. Ano ba yung mga cost pool dyan? The cost pool here are ordering and receiving material cost pool. So, sample of it is this one. No? So, ordering and receiving material cost pool. Alright? You have also here what you call setting up the machine cost pool. Alright? You have the machining cost pool, assembly cost pool, inspection and testing cost pool. You have painting cost pool, and supervising cost pool. So, lahat yan, class, your activity, your activity cost pool. O, class, ano naman yung activity cost driver here? Yung nasa baba, yung kulay pink. Okay? So, for example, ordering and receiving material cost pool, the formula here is that you divide it by the number of POs. No? Setting up the machine cost pool, number of setup. Okay? You have also here machining cost pool. Ang cost driver niya ay number of setup. Assembly, number of parts. Inspection and testing, number of tests. Painting cost pool, number of parts. Supervising cost pool, direct labor hours. That's your cost driver. So how do we compute for the activity-based rate? Just divide it. For example, go back again to the predetermined overhead rate. Anong formula? Total overhead cost divided by your cost driver. Pero in the activity-based costing, okay, ano yung formula, class? It is now per activity. Ordering and receiving material cost pool divided by number of POs. Okay? Setting up the machine cost pool divided by number of setup. Machining cost pool divided by number of hours or machine hours. Assembly cost pool just divided by the number of parts and so on and so forth. Diba same lang ang formula niya? Correct? Yes. Okay. So to illustrate this one, as part of your traditional costing, a simple case example will now be presented to compare traditional costing and activity-based costing. For example, class, Atlas Company produced 2 automobile anti-theft device, the boot and the boot and the club, sorry. And the company has 2 automobile, the anti-theft device, the boot and the club. Okay? The boot is a high volume item using the 25,000 units annually, while the club is a low volume, so meaning mas malaki ang boot, mas maliit ang club. Both products require 1 hour of direct labor. Therefore, annual direct labor hours are 30,000. Expected annual manufacturing cost. Class, please take note of your total. What is the total? 900,000. Okay. What is your predetermined, what is your cost driver? Ang sabi ay 30,000. Okay? So, predetermined overhead rate is how much? 900,000 divided by 30,000. So, meaning to say, magkano ba ang ating predetermined overhead rate using traditional costing? The answer here is at 30. Okay? So, the answer here is at 30. Alright. So, if you go to this one, no, as part of traditional costing, direct material cost per unit is 40 for boot and 30 for the club. The direct labor cost is at 12 for each product. And ano yung computations natin? So, the computations here is this one. Direct materials is 40, direct labor is 12, overhead is 30. While the club is 30, direct labor is 12, overhead naman is 30, and the unit cost here is worth 72. So, usually class sa ating traditional costing. Next one. Next one is about identifying the steps in the development of the activity-based costing. So, ito yung class mga steps, no, in the activity-based costing. So, activity-based costing involves the following steps. Number 1, identify the major activities that pertains to the manufacturer of the specific products and allocate manufacturing overhead costs to your activity cost pool. Okay? And number 2, identify the cost drivers that accurately measure each activity contributions to the finished product and compute the activity-based overhead rate. So, una-una, we get first our activity cost pool, and number 2, get the cost driver. And number 3, you just assign it, no, to the manufacturing cost or the overhead cost. Alright, sige, one by one tayo, class. Identify first your activity cost pool. Okay. So, how do we identify our activity cost pool? No? A well-designed activity-based costing system starts with an analysis of the activities. Ano yung mga activities natin that we will perform in terms of the manufacturing? And this analysis should identify all resource-consuming activities. So, for example, you'll identify that the The activity cost pools are uh, uh, machine setup, your machining, and also your inspecting. So, yung class in yung ginawa nyo, in particular, no, in computing for our activities. Okay. Again, machine setup, machining, and your inspection. Okay. Okay. Allocating the overhead cost pool. Class, balik tayo sa ating discussion kanina in computing for our predetermined overhead rate. If I notice, class, the formula for that one is estimated annual overhead cost, which is 900,000. And you will divide it by your activity cost driver. Class, tinan nyo dito. In the activity cost pool, yung 900,000 ay to be classified as to be classified in terms of activity cost pool. So, sinabi dito, class, out of 900,000, setting up the machine is worth 300. Out of 900,000, machining is 500. Out of 900,000, inspection is worth 100,000. So, yan, class, ang nilagay dito, or number one, to be part or to be identified or to be prepared, no, in terms of our activity cost pool. And the cost here is worth 900,000. Okay. Next one. Next one is to identify your activity cost driver in the activity-based costing. How do we do that? Class, babalik na naman tayo sa computations ng predetermined overhead rate. How do we compute for that one? Total estimated annual overhead divided by total cost driver. Pero ito, class, it is based on activity cost pool to be divided by your cost driver. Same na same yung formula. Okay? Pero ito ay based on per cost driver. For example, activity cost pool of machine setup is number of setup. Activity cost pool is machining is machine hours. Inspection or inspecting naman is number of inspection. So, ano yung mga expected cost driver? 1,500 setup, 50,000 machine hours, and 2,000 inspection. Class, go to this one. How do we compute for the overhead rates? No? Availability and the ease of obtaining data related to the activity cost driver is an important factor that must be considered in terms of your selection. Okay. So, activity-based costing, how do we compute for the activity-based rate? Estimated overhead per activity divided by expected use of the cost driver per activity. So, it should be based on per activity. It is equals to the activity-based overhead rate. Again, how do we compute for that one? Diba? Parang same lang. For our overhead in traditional, total overhead divided by cost driver. Kaya lang ito pakakaiba niya ay, it is based on per activity. Estimated overhead per activity divided by expected use of the cost driver per activity. And that's your activity-based overhead rates. Okay. How do we do that? Please check on this one, no? In computing for our overhead rates, diba? Estimated overhead per activity divided by expected use of the cost drivers per activity, and that's your activity-based rate. So 300,000 divided by 1.5, and you have 200 per setup. Machining naman, 500,000 divided by 50,000 is equals to $10. Okay? 100,000 divided by 2,000, and you have 50 per inspection. Diba, class? If you notice, parang same formula lang. Kaya lang ito ay per activity. Okay, very good. Next one. Ito, class, we will now multiply it para makompute natin yung ating cost. Okay? Parang applied manufacturing overhead. Ang sabi, machine setup daw is that you have 500 for boot, and you have also 1,000 for the club. You have machining of 30,000 for the boot, and the club is 20,000. Inspection naman, ganun din, 500, and you have 1,500. Okay. So, how do we do that, no? Just multiply. Di ba? Para siyang yung applied manufacturing overhead natin, no? Sana napipicture out nyo in computing for that one, no? Ito class is based on activity-based rate. Okay? So, meaning class 500 to be multiplied by the cost driver is 500 actual or expected to be multiplied by the activity-based rate. Meaning class in the cost assigned, so 500 to be multiplied by 200 pesos, yun yung kanina ha. Then you have 30,000 to be multiplied by 10, and you have 500 to be multiplied by 50. And the cost assigned to this one is that 100,000, 300,000, and you have 25,000. So, total cost assigned is you have 425,000. Then you will divide it by 25,000 kasi nga plus Atlas has a high volume. Okay? So, meaning to say, how much would be our overhead cost per unit? 17. So, 425 divided by 25,000. Okay? So, that's now your 17 pesos. So, 17 would be our overhead cost per unit. Okay, next one. How about naman in terms of the club? No, so, ito naman class ay based on per club. So, same lang class ha. 100, 1,000. Okay? Just divide it, just multiply it by 200, 20,000, just multiply it by 10, 1,500, just multiply it by 50. Okay? So, all in all, it is 475. And it is to be divided by 5,000 units produced. Okay? That's your low volume naman, no? So, makano yung overhead natin? 95,000. May class ha, parang dyan pa lang, meron ako nakikita, no? Alright? So, very important here is this one. Mamaya class, we'll give you, no? For this. Okay. Alright. Assigning overhead cost. Ito class, low volume and the high volume. So, the shift of the overhead from high to low volume products results in a more accurate costing for two reasons. Low volume products often require more special handling. So, you have set up, okay? The low volume product is responsible for more overhead cost per unit than the high volume. The overhead costs incurred by the low volume product often are disproportionate to the additional costing based on direct labor. Okay. Diba class, if you notice, the boot, magkano yung traditional costing niya? 82. Activity-based costing, you have 69. The club naman, as a low volume, you have 72 in traditional and 137 in the activity-based costing. The comparison shows that the unit costs under traditional costing are significantly distorted. The cost of producing the boot is overstated by 13. We have our activity-based costing. And the cost of producing the club naman is understated by 65 per unit. So, paano yung pag ganon pa? So, paano pag ganon? Okay? So, comparing the unit costs, the difference in the cost per unit are attributable entirely to the manufacturing overhead. Okay. Likely consequences of the difference is that Atlas has been overpricing the boot and possibly losing the market. In addition, it has been sacrificing profitability by the underpricing in the club. Okay, class. Ito class ha. Tira nyo. The boot has high volume. Ano mas okay? Traditional or activity? Of course, traditional costing because you have a 69. The club, ano mas okay? 72 or 137? Of course, traditional costing of 72. So, ano ibig sabihin, class? Meaning to say, if you have high volume, mas okay ang activity-based costing. If it is low volume, mas okay naman ang ating traditional costing. So, it would depend on the company if you have a high or the low volume. Okay? Yan. Hopefully, clear tayo, class, ha? Alright, next one. Understand the benefits and the limitations of your activity-based costing system. So, ano yung mga benefits of the ABC and limitations? Benefits of the ABC. So, the primary benefit of the ABC is a more accurate product costing. So, activity-based costing leads to a more cost pools. Yes, di ba? Kanina, ang dami nating cost pool. Okay? Activity-based costing naman leads to enhanced control over our overhead costs. Kasi nga, it is based on per activity. What else? Activity-based costing leads to a better management decision. So, yan yung mga ating mga benefits in terms of activity-based costing. Kaya lang, may mga limitations naman. Okay? Activity-based costing can be expensive to use. Yes. Because you have a multiple product or multiple activity. And some arbitrary allocations continue, even though more overhead costs can be assigned directly to the product, certain overhead costs remain to be allocated by the means of some arbitrary volume or what you call cost driver. Okay? Ayan. So, when to switch to activity-based costing? So, the presence of one or more of the following factors indicates that the activity-based costing as the superior costing system. So, ito yung mga gagawin natin para to switch to the activity-based costing. So, product lines differ greatly in volume. So, kung madami ka ng volume, you will now shift. Mas maganda mag-shift ka na sa ating activity-based costing. Product lines are numerous, diverse, and require differing degrees and support services. The manufacturing process or the numbers of products has significantly, yes. And you have production or marketing managers are ignoring data provided by the existing system and are instead using alternative data in making your decision process. Okay? That's why, when switching to the activity-based costing, the redesign and installation of a new product costing a significant decision, no? Kaya nga the manager in finance need to be very cautious and deliberative when initiating the changes in the accounting system. Yan, okay? Next one is all about activity-based management. Alright, so ano bang ibig sabihin, class, ng activity-based management? It is a extension, no? So class, activity-based management is the extension of your activity-based costing from a product costing system to the management functions. Last, pag sinabi class activity-based management, hindi na mawawala dyan yung tinatawag nating value-added and the non-value-added. What do you mean of value-added? So value-added is more on you add value to the cost to the services, no? You add value in terms of increasing the worth of the product or services. Okay? You increase the market share. Okay? They involve resource usage and related costs that customers are willing to pay. That's why here, class, no? The value added here are the functions of actually manufacturing the product and or services. O class, ano yung mga sample ng ating value added and the non-value added, no? So, mga sample dyan ay mga engineering design. Alright? You have the machining. You have the assembly painting. Yan. You have the packaging. So, ang dami class, Yan yung mga sample of a value added. No? Because of that one, there would be added value to your product. Diba? Pag sinabi packaging, pag sinabi San Miguel product, diba? Alam mo na yung logo ng San Miguel. It will add value. Okay? Pero class, may tinatawag din naman non-value added. So, what is non-value added? So, our productions or services related to the activities that simply add cost. Meaning, class, you just simply add cost without increasing the market value, without increasing the net worth, and also increase the time spent on to the product and to the services. Alright. Examples include repairs. Di ba? Pag repairs, wala naman tayong laglag na benepisyo dyan. Di ba? Storage of inventory. Di ba? Moving of materials, you have maintenance, and you have our inspection. Okay? So, identifying and labeling as the value added or non-value is part of the analysis, okay, of the operation. So, depende yan class sa inyo, no? Alright? In terms of the activity-based costing. Alright. Class, ano pa yung mga example pala? Inspection, moving of. Kaya lang class, if you notice, inspection daw ay non-value added. Depende pa ng class, no? Because of this, not all the activities labeled as non-value added are totally wasteful or they can be totally eliminated. No? For example, although inspection is a non-value-added activity from the customer's perspective, few companies would eliminate their quality control functions. Yan. Similarly, moving and waiting time is a non-value added, but it would be impossible to completely eliminate it. Di ba? Kasi nga, it will also, parang kasama din siya sa ating, activity-based costing. Okay? Alright. So, next one, non-value added versus non-value added as activities. No? Nevertheless, because the managers recognizes the non-value added activities, no, they're motivated to minimize as much as possible our non-value added. And very important here is to help or to have or to concentrate on continuous improvement of operations and also your activities. Okay? So again, thank you very much for this, and hopefully that you can be able to learn more about the activity-based costing. See you. Bye-bye.